All right, Amy, so thanks again for doing this. My first question to you is tell the audience, just a little bit about yourself and how you started in the community.
Sure, great question. My name is Amy Pace. I am an associate professor of speech and hearing sciences at the University of Washington, and I am a speech language pathologist licensed in the state of Washington. And let's see, I started in the field, in the community, a little bit of a roundabout way. My background is actually in Spanish literature and more humanities studies. I was really interested in language growing up, and just loved learning languages, connecting with people across cultures, and visiting their worlds and learning their way of life. And that led me to meeting a lot of individuals, children, families who wanted to learn other languages or were hoping to maintain their home languages. And I learned about the field of speech language pathology through kind of my travels, and my own passion for learning language. And that brought me to study and earn a degree in speech and hearing sciences. So I started by working out with families and kids, and that led me to this field. And yeah, here I
Hmm.
am.
So tell me a little bit about your work as a speech language pathologist, because oftentimes speech language pathologists work with different populations in that they work with kids, others work with more adults. Where do you what about your case? What sorts of populations do you work with?
That's another good question. I work with several. So I think of my main area of focus in the birth to five world. So I work a lot with families who have very young children, infants and toddlers with language learning disabilities, with language delays, with developmental delays. And I also work in a realm of multilingual families. So families who are speaking more than one language at home. Um, I also have kind of a branch of the research that I do, and the clinical work that I do with individuals who are involved with the incarceration system. So I work with families who have very young children, incarcerated mothers who may be living with their infants in Washington's prison nursery system, as well as incarcerated mothers who have older children who they are not living with currently. So I kind of have a range of families and populations that I work with clinically and both in research contexts.
Hmm. So like what does that look like? What do you sort of do as a speech language pathologist to sort of, help people in those populations, I guess not just figure out some of the language barriers that they may have, but also like build, relationships.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that is a really big part, I think, of working with families and very young children. The caregivers are really the primary people who interact with very young children most of the day. So, as speech language pathologists, we really have to focus on making that connection with the families and the communities because we are not going to be effective in our 15-minute session with a family. So, what we really are doing a lot of the time is coaching caregivers and family members how to support their very young kids. So it really is building the relationship with families. And so a lot of that for me, what that looks like is um, I do a lot of research, and I think that my clinical experience helps to inform the questions that I ask during my research. So, one of our projects, for example, has focused on what are the best ways to support a child's ability to become bilingual when the family speaks a different language. In this context, these are Spanish speaking families. Um, and the child may also have a delay or disability. So, how are we going to support the family to maintain that bilingualism, that multilingualism, and ensure that the child doesn't only learn, for example, English? So, that's going to families' homes and observing the way that they interact with their child on a daily basis. It's identifying some of the culturally responsive treatments that we might have and the way that the families are already engaging with their child and their community, and really building on that from a strengths-based approach to support the child's long-term communication outcomes.
Mm-hmm. My next question is, what have like students in each of your classes, like what have they said in terms of like being in your classes, but also working with you in different types of research? What have they sort of learned from your type of work?
That's a really good question. I really do believe in the research and clinical practice combination. So, whenever I can, I support students to get involved in my research lab, which is called the Child Language Lab. A lot of the students have been trained to collect data in different settings. So, this might be administering some type of standardized test or um, implementing a research paradigm. So we do a lot of word learning studies to measure some of the skills that a child has regarding learning new language and new communication strategies. And I think the students really love connecting with families. So going to the families' homes and observing a session, or working with the child directly to do some of these research components. But I think the students are really savvy and they really enjoy that hands-on approach where it's not necessarily book learning or classroom learning, but it's getting out, observing a classroom, a preschool, coming with us to one of the correction centers in Washington. So we also run, when we work with incarcerated individuals, we have a program that we call the Partnership for Healthy Parenting. And this is a service learning program for master's students in speech language pathology where we involve them in our visits to the Washington Correction Center for Women. So we go down there, we provide some parenting workshops for moms who live with their infants in the correction center. And the students get to be involved in that relationship building and education support for those individuals. So I love the aspects of my work that let me get out into the world and take the students with me.
Mm-hmm. My next question is, what have you learned in doing this kind of work? And also, what do you want to learn? Like if you want to learn something new, because you said that you work not just with multicultural, multilingual individuals and families, and people in prisons, but what do you hope to learn in the future? Like learn something new, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I've been thinking a lot about this, and it relates to what I was doing last year. So I had the opportunity to take a sabbatical, which is like a year-long break from working at the university and doing a project somewhere else. So I had a Fulbright Award, which is a research award, a binational award to go live in Mexico. So I spent about 9 months down in the Yucatan. I was living in a region called near Merida and doing some research in a very small town of about 5,000 called Mani. And this project allowed me to learn a lot of new things. So I already speak Spanish, but the community in Mani is primarily, although many speak Spanish as well, the home language for many families is Yucatec Maya, one of the indigenous languages, a widely spoken indigenous language in the region. And so I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with families in Mani. I was working primarily with families who had preschool aged children. And I was investigating some of the strategies that they're using to support their child's maintenance of both Spanish and Maya in the home. So I had the opportunity to learn some Maya. That is on my list of improving over the next few years. I have been studying it for about a year and a half now, and it is a challenging language for me. I'm making progress, but I would like to add more of my Maya skills. But also, I really enjoy the opportunity to connect again with new cultures, and I do hope to continue that project. Maybe thinking about ways to bring students down and support the community as a speech language pathologist as well. I was there more in my capacity as a researcher, but I really would like to be able to connect more with the community as a speech language pathologist as well.
Hmm. Are there opportunities where you will get to bring your students along to the to the that place to the Yucatan?
Yeah, in the Yucatan. I hope so. We are currently looking at some study abroad opportunities that are being offered. The University of Washington has a lot of funding for global, called the Global Innovation Fund, and we're thinking about ways that we might partner with some of the institutions that are down there and some of the connections I made while I was living there to think about ways to bring more students down. I think that would be a really, really fun next step for this project.
All right, to kind of wrap this up, what can students learn from this kind of work? Just not just the speech language pathology, but also incorporating, you know, different cultures and the like, what can students who are entering speech pathology learn to sort of not just learn the aspects of speech language pathology, but also incorporate, just like you said in your experience, with like the multicultural
Mhm.
aspect into that field.
Yeah, that's a really important point, I think, for speech language pathology, for communication sciences. Um, I'm maybe you have heard that most of our field is homogenous. We have a lot um, of individuals who are female, individuals who are white, and we really hope to diversify the field. So it's really important to connect with our patients and our families on cultural identity levels where we can intersect with them. So supporting the diversification of our field and making sure that we have different cultures, different perspectives, different socioeconomic strata, represented in our profession is really, really critical. So we have several initiatives to support some training and supporting students with, for example, funding their education so that they can become speech language pathologists. So one of our current grants right now that we have is called the PIECES program, PIECES, and it's an interdisciplinary a funding opportunity for students who are interested in special education and speech language pathology and want to study culturally responsive and culturally informed approaches to intervention for young kiddos. And so we have um, a cohort of students who are focusing specifically on learning some of these strategies and provide funding for their education so they can continue in our program. But I think that's a really critical aspect for anyone thinking to enter the field of speech language pathology. We have to recognize that most of the world is multilingual. We have a large proportion of monolingual speakers in the United States, but that's kind of by um, result of our educational policies, which really have promoted primarily English, and some of the barriers to access that individuals encounter when they are not English speakers. So any way that we can inform and educate our students to support multilingual learners to become multilingual themselves. So it's easier now to pick up a new language. You can go online and find the resources, practice with people over Zoom who maybe live in another country. And there's ways to connect across languages and across the world now that I think when I was a kid didn't exist. To I had to like pull out. I have grandparents who are Italian and Portuguese, and if I wanted to learn the words from them, I had to like pull out the words from them. And how do you say this? And how do you say this? And so I wasn't learning it as a child. But we have ways now to connect across, I think, and build those skills and really become aware of other languages and other perspectives. So that's a real key takeaway, I think, and in a kind of important area and a fun area for our field, right?
Hmm. And there's also Duolingo.
Exactly. Exactly. All those great new technologies we have to support our language learning. Yeah, so get out there. Learn what languages are you learning?
Yeah. All right.